Hi everyone, my name is Hin Nam, and today I'm going to present my research, landscape seeing and immersive stylistic visualization of 3D scans of a Hong Kong urban park. I slightly changed the title to better emphasize my practice in Hong Kong. So I'm a PhD candidate from the School of Creative Media, City University of Hong Kong, and the objective of my research is to understand what constitutes artificial landscapes in Hong Kong. And the concept of artificial landscape will be elaborate more in the later part of my presentation. And the other objective is to propose the landscape seeing and art-based approach that emphasize the embodied experiences in artificial landscape. So in my presentation today, I will first introduce the nature of artificial landscape from the urban design point of view by comparing different cultural significance of artificial and natural landscapes. And then I will conduct two case studies of imagery representation of landscapes. One is from a geographic study of visual experiences in urban parks in Hong Kong, and the other one is a historical study of landscape paintings in China. And lastly, I will introduce my practice-based research on the landscape seeing and based on the 3D point cloud scanning and visualization of Nam Fong Park in Hong Kong. Speaking of urban parks as artificial landscapes, we have to start with the concept in urbanism, which is an urban design principle that values the synthesis of the city and the country. And in urbanism, landscape is related to livability. So urbanists or architects introduced the concept garden city to balance between the city full of buildings and also rural area full of rural area that is close to the nature. And architects such as the Zaha the architecture introduced projects like One North Master Plan, which is a mimesis of landscape orchestrated by buildings and greeneries. And more artificial landscapes examples comes with the projects by architects and planners who synthesize public space between cultural and natural system to articulate cultural identities. One prominent examples of artificial landscape is the Gardens by the Bay project in Singapore, and it celebrates the Western bourgeois value by introducing a botanic garden, a garden show, a civic park, a theme park, and a research center to ecologically instructive and speculative landscapes. So they situated these projects, the Gardens by the Bay, in the city center of Singapore. And on the other hand, from a pictorial point of view, the Republican Chinese landscape painters tried to express their patriotic thoughts through Chinese painting. So they did a lot of superior paintings of some natural landscape in China back then in the Republican period, particularly the Mount Huang. So this kind of artificial landscape really brings two questions. The first one is how do landscape generate cultural identities? And the second one is what makes an artificial landscape beyond an imitation of the natural one? So these two questions brings me to the case studies of first the Kowloon Park as an artificial landscape and the definition of urban park. To Wong and Dormos in their research is the artificial natural setting that delights urbanites. And in the policy of Hong Kong, artificial landscape can also be considered as open space planning, which aims to create safe, identifiable, and accessible spaces while creating local identity as well as a sense of community and facilitating parental or mutual care of different groups. So basically, like the Kowloon Park artificial landscape includes some indoor and outdoor parks, and the outdoor parks are particularly landscaped for amenity areas. And in their research, they identified that visual experiences in Kowloon Park uh, um, has a tendency to have a higher likability with the natural scenes. So the likability of urban park scenes diminish with increasing artificiality. And based on the research, they identified there is a dualism between natural and artificial elements in artificial landscape. But does that mean those artificial elements are optional or unpreferable? No, that's not really true. And I will explain more on that in the later part of my research. And the second case study is the 20th century Chinese open-air paintings. And in the paintings, they are actually direct signification of landscapes. And this painting reflects the painters' immediated responses to the nature through arts. And this genre of painting is actually called 写生 in Chinese, which refers to sketching from life emphasizing visual representation as the result of a direct encounter between painters and subjects. And in this context, the landscape actually. And to produce the 写生 painting or the open air paintings, there are four principles to follow. The first one is to take views, 取景. The second one is to do the framing of the painting, which means 构图 in Chinese. The third one is to set up the perspective, 透视, and the last one is to identify the viewpoints, 视点, and also the horizon, 地平线. And by following these four principles, and it's possible to encapsulate the whole journey into one painting. So, and therefore, there are more than one vanishing points in open air paintings, and painters tries to personify landscapes such as Mount Huan with special angle to romanticize the landscapes. And based on these two case studies, I would say Wang's and Domro's studies is pretty retrospective. They suggest a correlation between natural elements and visual pleasure in artificial landscape, while Gu's study is pretty prospective. She suggests that observation and making of open-air paintings should be inspired by landscape should be some process that allows painter or artist to express themselves. So the main question of my research is what defines a space as a landscape? And therefore, I propose the landscape seeing, which is a practice-based method that meticulously follows the framework of making open-air paintings to study artificial landscapes. And in my practice, I incorporate the landscape seeing to produce an immersive stylistic visualization of 3D scans. And there are three processes to do so. The first one is to realize an artificial landscape through 3D scanning. And then I tried to follow the observational framework of producing open-air paintings. And lastly, I comes up with scan-based procedural VR animation of Nam Fong Park, which I consider an artificial landscape in Hong Kong. And the objective of this practice is to recognize artificial landscapes through my embodied experiences and artistic representations. And the first step is 取景, the scanning process. 取景 actually refers to view taking in Chinese, and the definition of view taking is to capture the very moments at which the painters encounter natures. And I do so by incorporating 3D scanning, which I consider a rendezvous with the park and artificial landscape. And the scanning process allows me to capture point clouds of the environment, which are geometric data of points recording the Cartesian coordination and the color of the environment. And as you can see, I captured panoramic photos of the area that I scanned, and and intentionally incorporate natural and artificial elements in my scans. For example, the pavement down here and also the greeneries situated in the park. And after that, I composed the scenes by incorporating the concept go tool, which refers to delivered from the two characters go, which means constructing two pictures. And the meaning of them is the construction of a picture is self-evident or generally the composition. So to me, the composition is pretty selective because a large proportion of Nam Fong Park is alone. So there are insufficient data for visualizing the lawn. So I deliberately scan the area with more trees and more vertically situated artificial elements such as fences or lampposts. And that also leads to some findings based on the limitation of LiDAR, but I actually use that as a motivation for improving the scenic design. And in addition to the still composition, I also incorporate some temporal elements in it. So as you can see, there is a path along the three segments I dissected from all the scans. And when the virtual camera passes through the specific area, that area will be visualized. And only one area will be visualized at a time. So I try to include the temporal element to enrich the composition and the Qujin and code to actually represent my embodied experiences in the artificial landscape. And then it goes to the 透视 and 地平线, which refers to the 360-degree visualization and the change of perspective. And 透视 and 地平线 are actually the visual representations of the pictures. 透视 refers to linear perspective back to that context, and 地平线 refers to the horizon, which define the eye level. And I use the change of viewports to incorporate some changes of distortion because of the perspective to suggest some motion in my animation. And actually, I introduced the concept of perspective of the viewport, which means the linear perspective because of the virtual camera simulation, and also the perspective for the scan, because when the scan is basically based on the position of the scanner. So the closer the scanner, the more data are captured, and vice versa. So it actually contributes to a second degree of perspective that the farther the scans, the less data are captured. And I deliberately interplay with this perspective of scan with the perspective of viewports to visualize the seen and unseen in the park, especially as well as the artificial and the greeneries in the park. And for the aesthetics of the visualization, I incorporate two iterations of visualization. The first one is the translucent shader, and the second one is the volumetric approximation. The translucent shader is a shader that is relatively opaque in the core and relatively transparent in the edge. So the transparency increases gradually to the periphery, and it creates an impressionist visual environment that you can almost recognize the shape with no materiality, and it actually unifies the materiality of the artificial and the natural elements in the scene. And to me, artificial structure are actually the components of the artificial landscape instead of the add-on of the natural landscape. And therefore, I really want to unify the materiality of both the artificial and the natural elements in the artificial landscape. And it also allows me to blend the blend the end of the scan and blur the boundary of it in order to dissolve the area with fewer points into the background, which are pretty empty, as you can see. And the second iteration is the volumetric approximation. It is a procedural modeling method that builds meshes by sampling the distribution of the points in the point cloud. The objective of this is to better define the structure of the scans because of the scene, because those point cloud are actually quite hard to define. So these models, these meshes actually works as the outline, like the traditional Chinese ink painting. And the procedure is like this. So I first sample the points from the scan, and then I turn them into voxels, then generate meshes out of the voxel. And lastly, I create wireframe models based on the meshes. And as you can see, these are actually the models that I generate from this iteration. And then when I apply the specific translucent shader, it actually visualizes as the brushstroke that you can see in the traditional Chinese painting. So these structure are also temporal. So it follows what I have mentioned. When the camera pass through, those areas get sampled. And lastly, I would like to share the actual animation with you. I actually make some ambisonic sound for the animation, but I don't think it works very well for the Zoom presentation. So later on, if you are interested with this animation, you can actually approach me and ask for the link to this video. And as you can see, the points and also the meshes get resampled when the camera pass through to a specific location. And this path actually reference the approach of the goal to address a more poetic approach to my experiences in Nam Fong Park. And I deliberately turned that into monochromic to imitate the ink style in Chinese painting that I am really inspired by. And I think it's almost there. Oh. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.